Yeah.
It was a trout set, but yeah. Definitely was.
Alright, we're going to be tying Mike Mercer's Jiggy Microme. Great fly, catches a lot of fish, gets down quick and riffles. In the vise, I have a Umpqua 400 BL for the hook. And bead I'm using is a 2.8 millimeter slotted tungsten bead in copper from Umpqua as well. Thread, we're going to be using just a uni 8/0 in Camel. Alright, start your thread just behind the bead because we are going to do a bigger thorax and build it up, so make sure you leave yourself some room. And you can also use that as your marker for where you're going to start your thorax and also end your peacock quill. With this fly, we do have to make sure that the body is nice and thin, so you are going to have to counterspin your thread to flatten that out. For the tail, we're just going to use a Spanish Coq de Leon in Pardo. You don't need a ton of fibers for this one, so just a few will do the trick. And I tie this tail in where it's the full length of the shank. So less fibers, but definitely a long tail. Longer, I should say. And trim out the tail fibers. Again, don't forget to spin that thread to make it flat. We'll take it all the way back to that tail tie-in point and just make sure that tail doesn't get pushed around as you're coming back. I do like to tie in my strip peacock quill at the back so I'm not having to go over it 2 different times and build up even more bulk. And then just wrap forward. Just make sure you got touch and wraps. And I'll put a whip finish in before I wrap this quill. Not a whip finish. You know what I mean. Good old half hitches. I do use hackle pliers for peacock quills just because they break so easy. If you turn your, well, the way I do is I turn my vise sideways and go ahead and clip that on. That way I'm not pulling left and right on that quill and it's already ready just to start getting wrapped. So I do a very light first wrap and then I can start pulling a little bit harder to tighten it up. And we are going to go over this with some Solares just to make sure that it's protected. Fish aren't going to be breaking it. Alright, grab your thread, carefully do a drop wrap, go behind. I do a couple behind and then I'll go in front without breaking this too early. There we go. Whoop. There it is. I knew I could do it. Alright, then I just cover up that last wrap just so I know it's not going to go anywhere. I'll put a 1/2 inch in. Throw my thread on the holder. Make sure my tail's where I want it. Get that Solares bone dry. The stuff is awesome. Cures quick, cures hard. You don't have to worry about it breaking out or being too brittle. And you just got to make sure you don't want to build up your body right here. You just want a nice smooth body, but enough to protect that quill. And see, I always try to touch right at the end there and make sure that it creates a smooth transition from that quill and the tail to the hook. And then hit it with the good old torch. Alright, get it cured. About 10 seconds does the trick, and we're good to go. And you're thinking to yourself, that wasn't 10 seconds. It's a good thing I know how to cut clips. All right, and for the flash, because every good fly has to have some flash, we're going to use the micro Flashabou, the 1/100. I use Opal for this. I think the original uses Mirage. I really like how the Opal flashes in the water. It's always done well for me. And I take 10 or so strands. It's not a ton, but it's enough to build up a nice wing case, and you get a lot of flash out of this. Trim it just so your butt ends are straight. Makes it a whole lot easier when you're tying it in so you don't have pieces going everywhere. Straighten up your bead. Put her on. And then just get that started right behind the bead. And then I'm going to wrap back on these Umpqua 400s. I do bring it right to essentially where the point of the hook is. Trying to keep enough of that body and that quill showing, but this is a bigger thorax fly, so you got to make it look somewhat proportional lengthwise. But you'll see you kind of overdub this thorax and build it up a good bit. So the back half is more realistic. This front half is going to be more of an attractor style. I like to hold up all my materials upside down so it's a mystery. You have to turn your computer or your phone upside down. So I'm using an olive brown hairline. I do pick out some of the longer guard hairs in there, and we're just going to do a nice thin noodle. Because we are doing an oversized thorax, I put about 1.5 inches worth of a noodle on there, but it is super thin. So you'll bring it back to right where that tie-in was for your Flashabou, and then just start building up a little bit of a ball. Again, it's not massive, but it's bigger than your average thorax on a small fly like this. I don't like that. Remember, just pull it out and do it again if you don't like it. You'd rather it be right than not that great. I'm a little OCD, if you will, so I like everything to look identical to one another. All right, this one's looking better. There we go. As opposed to just kind of like a blob sitting there. There we go. All right, so for the legs, I use Z-Lon and olive brown. This, you really don't need a lot. I use maybe 4 or 5 fibers. So just take your main strand, pick out a few fibers. They move real well in the water. I've tried to use other material, but the original pattern calls for Z-Lon, and they were right. They nailed it. Because I have used materials that are a little stiffer, so they don't move well in the water. And I feel like fish feel it and just spit it out quick. So just tie it in on one side. Bring that around to the other side. Make sure, more or less they are where you want them. And then we're going to build up and continue that thorax and really finish tying those legs in. So for this section of the thorax / collar, I guess, I am using a chocolate brown from Hairline, and I am going to still pick out some of those longer guard hairs out of this, just so it's not too spiky. You don't need a ton for this part. Again, just a super thin noodle. And all we're doing is continuing that thorax up to the bead. And then we'll bring that flash over once we get this set up. Stroke everything back, get it where you want it, and then match that size. Kind of keep going up a little bit for that kind of tapered thorax. Make sure everything's, right where you want it. Then you're going to take your micro Flashabou, pull it over, and then make sure it's going dead center. You got to fight some of these legs from the Z-Lon. I just do a drop route, and then I pull down tight when I know it's in the right spot. I'll do one behind it. All right, we got that. So go front, behind, and do one more in the front to really lock that down. And I'm going to grab my scissors that I accidentally threw when my dog barked and scared me. Trim this as close as I can to the bead. And I'm going to do a little collar again of that chocolate brown dubbing, just to hide that where I trim that off. Trim your legs. I trim my legs just at the back. Having a little trouble here. Just at the back of the body. All right. So it's going right down the middle. That's where I want it. I like to just tie in a little collar, like I said, just to cover up that little bit that's sticking up. Kind of go in front of it and push it back down. It'll bend it over and really lock it in place also. Take your whip finish. Do a few turns. Don't break your thread, because it's never fun. Come in, trim it off, and then I will hit this with a little bit more UV. Not a ton, I don't want it to saturate in there, but I just put a little on the thread and hit it. Luckily that the bead size, it does somewhat protect that. It protects that whip finish. I really never have issues with that coming undone. Dryer, cure. There we go. Mike Mercer's Jiggy Micro May. This is in a blue winged olive variation. Go tie 'em. Go fish 'em.